I tried to help a stranger in need, but what happened next dragged me into a nightmare I never saw coming. The terrifying twist that changed my life forever. I had always been the kind of person who tried to help others, whether it was offering a hand to a friend in need or volunteering at local shelters. I believed that the world would be a better place if we all just took a moment to care for each other. It wasn't some grand idealism or a desire for recognition. It was simply who I was. I like to think that my actions, however small, could make a difference. I had no idea that my good intentions would soon lead me down a path I could never have predicted, a path that would change my life forever. It all started on a quiet evening when I was walking home from work. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the streets were bathed in that soft golden glow that makes everything seem a little more peaceful. I had just finished a long day at the office, my mind buzzing with thoughts of dinner and the small, quiet routine of my evening. But fate, as it often does, had different plans. As I walked along the sidewalk, I noticed a figure standing near a streetlight, looking out of place. A woman, maybe in her late 20s or early 30s, was standing there, seemingly lost. Her posture was slouched, and she kept glancing nervously up and down the street, as if expecting someone to come for her, or perhaps as though she were waiting for something or someone. Her clothes were a little too neat for someone out at this hour. There was something about her appearance that struck me as odd. It was as if she didn't belong here, but at the same time, she was trying to blend in. As I passed by, something made me pause. I didn't know why, but I had this overwhelming sense that something was wrong. I turned back and hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She jumped slightly, as if startled by my presence. She turned to face me, her eyes wide and fearful. Her face was pale, and her lips trembled slightly as she opened her mouth to speak. I need help," she stammered, her voice low, almost inaudible. "I don't know who else to turn to. Please, please help me." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. There was something in her voice that screamed desperation, a kind of raw fear that made my skin crawl. I had no idea who this woman was or why she was out here alone, but something told me I couldn't just walk away. She needed help, and as much as I had no idea what kind of trouble she was in, I couldn't ignore her. Not now. "Hey, don't worry," I said, trying to reassure her with a calm smile. "What's going on? Can I help you somehow?" She glanced around quickly, almost as though she were afraid someone might be watching. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, shivering despite the warmth of the evening. Her eyes darted nervously as she spoke, her words coming out in a rush, like she couldn't say them fast enough. My name's Emily," she said, her voice still trembling. I don't know how to explain this, but I've been running from someone dangerous. I've tried everything to escape, but I can't anymore. They're coming for me, and I don't know what to do. I don't know where else to go." My stomach sank as I listened to her. A feeling of unease began to settle over me. There was something off about her story, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Was she exaggerating? Was she imagining things? It didn't make sense. Who would be after her? Who was she running from? I looked into her eyes, and what I saw there wasn't just fear. It was a kind of hopelessness, like she had already resigned herself to the idea that whatever was coming for her was inevitable. That kind of resignation doesn't happen unless you've seen something terrible, something beyond what most of us can imagine. "I don't know what to say," I said, unsure of what to do. "Who are you running from? Why don't you go to the police?" She shook her head quickly, her face now a mixture of anxiety and panic. "No, I can't go to the police. I can't trust anyone. They have eyes everywhere, and if I go to the cops, they'll find me. Please, you have to believe me. I've already tried to get help, but every time I do, it gets worse. They'll find me and—" She faltered, her voice breaking. For a moment, I saw a flash of something in her eyes, something dark and haunting. The kind of look that suggests she had seen things that no one should ever have to see. Her words trailed off as she stood there, her body trembling slightly as though she were fighting off a panic attack. I wanted to help. I wanted to believe her. But what could I possibly do? I didn't know her, I didn't know her story, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to get involved in whatever this was. But the more I looked at her, this fragile woman standing before me, so clearly afraid, the more I realized that I couldn't just turn my back on her. Something in me made a choice then, one I would regret later, but in that moment, it felt like the right thing to do. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "I'll help. What do you need? Tell me what's going on." Her eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and relief, and she nodded quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush. "They've been watching me for weeks now," she said. "At first I thought it was just paranoia, but then I started noticing things. Small things like my phone going off at strange times, strange people showing up in places I didn't expect. I thought I was being followed, and then they showed up at my apartment. That's when I knew it wasn't in my head anymore." My heart pounded faster as she spoke. Something about her words, the frantic way she was speaking, didn't add up. Was this just some kind of delusion, a mistake, or was she telling the truth? "And now you're hiding here?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. She nodded, her eyes darting around nervously. "I don't know what else to do. I've been trying to leave, but it's like they always know where I am. I don't even know how they're tracking me. Please, you don't understand. If they catch me, they won't just hurt me. They'll make sure I disappear. They'll make sure no one ever finds me again." There was a finality in her tone, something so chilling that I couldn't ignore it. Something inside me knew she wasn't lying. Whatever was happening, whatever she was running from, was real. And it wasn't just a coincidence that she was standing here in front of me, desperate for help. I didn't know it then, but this moment, this decision to help a complete stranger, would be the first step into a nightmare that I couldn't have predicted, a nightmare that would drag me into a world I had no business being a part of. But by the time I realized what I had truly gotten myself into, it would already be too late. "You're not alone," I said, more to reassure myself than her. "We'll figure this out. I'll help you." But as the words left my mouth, I could feel the weight of them hanging in the air. Something told me that helping her wouldn't just change her life, it would change mine. And it would drag me into a world of darkness, secrets, and danger that I wasn't ready to face. But by then, it was too late to turn back. I hadn't realized it at the time, but agreeing to help Emily that night wasn't just a simple act of kindness. It was the beginning of a descent into a world far darker than anything I had ever imagined. Her plea for help, desperate and raw, triggered something deep within me, a need to do what I could to help a fellow human being. But the truth was, I had no idea what I was really stepping into. I had no idea that the seemingly innocent gesture of offering assistance would ultimately pull me into a nightmare that would stretch the very limits of my sanity. After I agreed to help her, Emily's expression softened with relief, though I could still see the terror lurking in her eyes. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, something told me that I was about to learn just how far-reaching her troubles really were. As we stood there on the quiet street, the distant sounds of the city humming around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was watching us. "Let's get out of here," I suggested, trying to sound calm. "You can come with me, we'll figure things out. Do you have somewhere to stay?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't have anywhere safe," she said quietly. "They're everywhere watching, listening. I can't stay in one place too long, but I don't know what else to do." Her words made my heart race. Whoever they were, they had instilled such fear in her that she was convinced there was no escape. I didn't fully understand the depth of her situation, but I could tell she was desperate, and I wasn't about to leave her alone on a dark street at night. "Okay," I said, trying to think on my feet. "Let's go back to my place for now. It's not far and we can figure out what to do from there. It'll be safe for tonight." She gave me a shaky nod, and we started walking. As we moved through the dimly lit streets, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Emily was clearly on edge, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, as if expecting someone to leap out at her at any moment. I didn't know whether she was simply paranoid or whether the fear was justified, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just some random case of bad luck. Whatever had led her to this point was something far more sinister. When we arrived at my apartment, I tried to make her feel at ease. I offered her a glass of water and a seat on the couch, but she remained tense, barely touching the drink. Her hands trembled as she gripped the glass, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. She was clearly on high alert. "Emily," I said softly, trying to break the silence, "who are these people? What's going on? I can't help you unless I understand what you're dealing with." She looked at me for a long moment, then set the glass down, her fingers still trembling. She seemed to be weighing whether she could trust me, and for a moment I thought she might refuse to say anything at all. But then, as though the decision had been made, she exhaled sharply and began speaking, her voice low but steady. "I wasn't always like this," she said, her gaze focused on the floor as if she couldn't bear to look me in the eye. "I had a normal life, well, as normal as anyone else. I had a job, friends, a small apartment. I lived in peace, or at least I thought I did. But then everything changed." I sat across from her, listening intently, but something in the way she said those words, the way her voice cracked just slightly, made me feel like I was on the verge of uncovering a story that would shake me to my core. But even then, I couldn't have known just how deep the rabbit hole went. "It started with a phone call," she continued, her eyes distant. "At first it was just strange, a man's voice on the other end. He didn't tell me who he was, just that I should be careful, that there were people watching me. I thought it was a prank, but then things started happening, small things. My computer would act up and I'd get strange emails. Nothing obvious, just little things that made me think someone was paying attention to me. But I brushed it off. Who would care about me? I was nobody." She stopped for a moment, her hands clutching the edge of the couch as if she were about to break. I waited, knowing that she wasn't done yet, knowing that what she was about to say would explain everything. And sure enough, she continued, her voice growing more strained. "And then it escalated. One night I came home to find my front door unlocked. I thought I'd forgotten to lock it, but when I went inside, I saw that things were moved around. Little things, nothing major, but enough to make my skin crawl. It was like someone had been there, watching me, waiting. That's when I realized that it wasn't just in my head." A chill ran down my spine as I imagined her walking into her apartment, the unsettling feeling that someone had been there, lurking in the shadows. It made my stomach turn, but what came next was even worse. The next time I went to work, I found a note on my desk. It just said, "We know where you live." No signature, no explanation, just those words. And that's when I knew I wasn't being paranoid anymore. These people, whatever they were watching me. They were following me. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and I could see the raw fear in her eyes. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but I knew that whatever she was about to say next would be the key to understanding what was really going on. "They came for me that night," she said, her voice shaking. "I was at home alone when I heard someone at my door. I didn't answer, but they kept knocking. Then I heard the door handle rattle. I tried to call the police, but my phone was dead. I didn't know what to do. I just hid, hoping they wouldn't find me. But they knew. They always knew where I was." I could feel the weight of her words, the sense of helplessness that had settled deep within her. Whatever these people were, they had a reach far beyond anything I could comprehend. They had controlled her life in ways that were both subtle and terrifying, manipulating every aspect of her existence until she felt like a prisoner in her own world. She continued, her voice trembling as the words spilled out. "I've been running ever since. I've moved from place to place, but they always find me. I don't know how they do it. I don't know what they want, but I know they won't stop until they get what they want from me. I don't know what they want, but I know that if I don't keep running, if I don't hide, they'll take me. And I'll never be able to escape." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had just said. The idea of being hunted by unknown forces, by people who could track you down no matter how far you ran. That was the stuff of nightmares. But this wasn't just a story, it was real. And Emily was in the middle of it. She was running for her life, and I had become an unwilling participant in her nightmare. For the first time since we'd met, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I wasn't just helping a stranger anymore. I had been pulled into a situation far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure what I could do to help her, but I knew I had to try. I couldn't just leave her to face whatever was coming alone. "I don't know if there's anything anyone can do," she said softly, shaking her head. "But maybe if we can find out who they are, what they want, we can stop them, or at least I can stop running." And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just running from some nameless, faceless group. She was running from something bigger, something organized. She wasn't just a victim of chance. These people were targeting her for a reason, and I had just agreed to help her. I had just agreed to enter a world I knew nothing about, a world where the stakes were life and death, and there was no turning back. But it was already too late. I was in this now, and whatever happened next, I knew that my life, our lives, would never be the same again. By the time Emily finished recounting her tale, I was sitting on the edge of my seat, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the impossible things she had just said. There were too many questions, too many gaps in the story. Who were these people who had been watching her? What did they want? And why, of all people, was she the one they had targeted? As the silence stretched between us, I could feel the weight of her words settling into the space around us, suffocating the air. This wasn't just paranoia. Something far darker was at play here, something that went beyond what either of us could fully understand. Emily wasn't just a victim of random misfortune. She had been deliberately chosen, hunted like prey. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. "Emily, I need you to answer one more question," I said, my voice steady despite the confusion churning in my chest. "Who exactly are these people? What's their connection to you? Do you have any idea?" Her eyes flickered, her pupils dilating as though the question alone had sent a ripple of fear through her. She sat back in the chair, her hands gripping the edge of the seat, as though bracing herself for something. I could tell she was reluctant to answer, but there was no escaping it now. "I don't know much about them," she admitted, her voice tight. "I've only met a few of them in person, and even then it wasn't like they introduced themselves, but I've heard their names, and I've overheard things. They're not just a criminal organization or a group of thugs. They're part of something much bigger, something international maybe. They work in the shadows, manipulating everything behind the scenes. Government contracts, businesses, power plays that no one sees. They pull strings, and they don't care who they hurt in the process." I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. This was sounding less like a random case of stalking, and more like something out of a spy thriller, a tangled web of global power and intrigue. The idea of some shadowy, all-powerful group controlling things from the dark corners of society made my stomach tighten, but at the same time, it made sense in a way. If Emily was truly being targeted by such a group, it would explain the strange, calculated nature of their pursuit. This wasn't some random act of violence or chance. This was deliberate. She had been chosen. "So what exactly do they want from you?" I pressed. "Why you?" Emily's lips trembled, and her eyes seemed to drift far away, lost in memories she didn't want to relive. For a moment, I thought she might not answer, but then she took a deep breath and began speaking again. "I don't know if they want something specific from me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I've seen things. I've heard things I shouldn't have. A few months ago, I came across something at work that wasn't supposed to be there. Documents, codes, files that weren't meant to be accessed. I thought they were just part of some obscure project, something my company was working on, but when I looked closer, I saw names. I saw my name. And the more I dug, the more I realized that I wasn't just looking at some corporate paperwork. I was looking at a web of illegal activities, money laundering, human trafficking, things that I don't even want to repeat. I felt a sickening sensation rise in my stomach as she spoke. This wasn't just some misdirected attention or a simple case of someone being paranoid. She had stumbled onto something so huge, so dangerous, that it had forced her into hiding for her life. The kind of operation that involved power at levels most people never see. They noticed me after that, Emily continued, her voice strained. I didn't even know what I had found, but they knew, and they came after me. First it was just the surveillance, then they started following me, showing up when I least expected it, and then they made it clear that if I didn't stop digging, they would make sure I disappeared. They told me that if I kept poking around, I would regret it. They said I was a loose end, and they couldn't afford to leave someone like me alive. My mind was spinning. She had stumbled onto something much bigger than she had realized. These people, the ones hunting her, weren't just criminals. They were part of an organized network, one that wielded unimaginable power and resources, and now they had made Emily their target. I couldn't stop the words that tumbled out of my mouth. So, they want to silence you, because you know too much. Emily nodded, her face pale. Yes, and they're not going to stop until I'm gone. I've tried to leave, to escape, but every time I do, they find me. They track me down like they know exactly where I am. It's like they've got eyes everywhere. I don't know who they are or how they're doing it, but I know one thing: if they catch me, I won't make it out alive. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. It wasn't just her life on the line anymore. The moment I decided to help her, I had stepped into this dangerous game with her. Her fight had become my fight, and there was no turning back. I could feel the pressure building inside my chest. I had to do something, but what? How could I fight back against an organization so powerful that they could track someone down without leaving a trace? How could I protect her from something so insidious, something that had the ability to vanish in the shadows without a trace? I tried to think logically, but everything about this situation was completely illogical. I wasn't equipped for something like this. I was just a regular person, someone who went to work, paid my bills, and lived a quiet life. But now my life had been irrevocably intertwined with Emily's nightmare, and somehow I had to find a way to protect her. "Do you have any idea who they are?" I asked. "Do they have a name, any connections?" Emily shook her head slowly, her eyes searching mine with a look of helplessness. "I don't know. The only thing I've ever heard is the collective. That's what people call them, but no one ever talks about them directly. They operate in the shadows, and anyone who gets too close to them disappears. If they find out I'm still alive, they won't stop until they make me vanish." I felt a chill spread through me as she spoke. The collective. The name alone sounded like something out of a thriller or a dystopian novel, an anonymous, all-powerful organization that controlled everything from the shadows. And the fact that Emily had uncovered them, that she had accidentally stumbled upon their darkest secrets, made her the most dangerous person in their world. And now she was here in my apartment asking for my help. I had no idea what I was really getting into, but one thing was clear: I couldn't turn back now. The moment I agreed to help her, I had stepped into a world I didn't understand. A world where every step was a risk, where my life and hers was hanging by a thread. I stood up, trying to shake the rising dread that was settling deep in my chest. "Okay," I said, my voice determined, though I didn't feel nearly as confident as I sounded. "We'll figure this out, together." Emily looked up at me, her expression a mixture of fear and gratitude. She didn't say anything at first, but the way she looked at me spoke volumes. She didn't just need help, she needed someone she could trust, someone who wasn't afraid to fight back. And for the first time in my life, I realized that this wasn't just a random act of kindness. This was my fight now, too. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, we would face it together. And whatever darkness awaited us, we would have to navigate it, step by step, day by day. But I had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. And the more I learned, the more I realized that Emily's nightmare was far bigger, and far darker than either of us could have imagined. The more Emily spoke, the deeper I fell into a kind of horror that I couldn't escape. I had believed I was simply helping a stranger, offering a hand to someone who needed it. I didn't know I was opening the door to a world I had no business being a part of. The weight of her words, the dark secrets she had uncovered, pressed on my chest like a stone I couldn't remove. It was one thing to offer sympathy to someone in distress. It was another thing entirely to be swept into a deadly web of deceit, manipulation, and power, where every choice could cost you everything. Emily's revelation that she had stumbled upon a vast and powerful organization, the Collective, was chilling. But now that I was here in my apartment with her hiding from those who sought to silence her, I was tangled up in something far more dangerous than I could have imagined. I wasn't equipped for this. I wasn't prepared for what it meant to challenge a group like the Collective, to expose them, confront them, or even to survive them. But Emily needed me, and somehow I couldn't walk away. In that moment, it wasn't just her fight, it was mine too. She had dragged me into this unknowingly, and now that I knew the truth, I was in too deep to back out. "Do you have any other information?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Anything that might help us understand how the Collective operates, any weaknesses?" Emily looked at me, her eyes dull with fear. She looked like someone who had been running for far too long, her face pale, her movements jittery, as though the terror she had lived with for months had drained the life from her. But despite her exhaustion, there was still a spark in her eyes. She wasn't going down without a fight. Neither was I. "I don't know much more," she replied, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I'm not an expert in this kind of thing. I'm just a regular person who got caught in something I don't understand. But I do know one thing for sure, they'll stop at nothing to get what they want. They don't care about people. They only care about power. And they have people everywhere, people who will do anything to keep their secrets hidden." The more I heard, the more the weight of her words sank in. People everywhere. Power in every corner of the world. The Collective wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a network that stretched beyond borders, beyond governments, beyond any semblance of normal society. They were the puppeteers, and the world, our world, was their stage. But who were they really? What did they want with Emily? I knew she was the key to unraveling this, but she had no answers. She had found the puzzle pieces, but without context, they were just fragmented images of something much bigger. The questions burned in my mind. What had she uncovered? What had she seen that was so important? And why did they want to silence her? There were still so many gaps in the story, but the closer I looked, the more I realized that Emily wasn't the only one in danger. They had already found her, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure their secrets stayed buried. It wasn't just her life on the line. It was mine, too. "What happens if we don't do anything?" I asked, my voice barely audible. I needed to know what I was up against. What would happen if I walked away from this? If I let Emily fight alone? "They'll kill me," she said flatly. Her words were so calm, so matter-of-fact, that it sent a chill down my spine. It was as if she had accepted it, as if she had been living with the certainty of her own death for far too long. "And then they'll make sure no one knows what happened to me. They'll erase everything, my records, my existence, and they'll move on to their next victim." Her face was a mask of quiet despair, and it shook me to my core. She had no illusions left. She knew what was coming. She knew that if she didn't fight back now, she would be swallowed whole by the very system she had uncovered. The fact that she was sitting here, still alive, meant she had defied them for longer than they had anticipated. But she was running out of time, and I, by extension, was running out of time too. I stood up, packing the small space of my apartment, trying to think. My mind was spinning. What could we possibly do? How could we fight back against an organization so vast, so entrenched that they could erase someone's existence with a snap of their fingers? The very thought of it paralyzed me, but I couldn't stop now. I couldn't walk away. "We need to figure out how they're tracking you," I said, more to myself than to Emily. "We need to understand their methods, their resources. If we can disrupt their system, Maybe we can throw them off long enough to figure out what they really want and how to stop them. I don't think they're tracking me in the way you think, Emily said, her voice almost hollow. It's not just about technology or surveillance, it's something more insidious. I've been careful, but I've still seen signs that they're always a step ahead of me. I don't know how they do it, but they know everything about me. Everything. They've even started showing up in places I didn't expect them to be. It's like they have eyes in every corner of my life. I froze, eyes in every corner of her life. It was clear now that they weren't just tracking her movements, they were manipulating her environment. They were watching her every move, anticipating her actions. They had some kind of control over her life, and it wasn't just a matter of following her from place to place. They were planted inside her life, inside her every choice. Are you telling me they have people inside your job, inside your personal life? I asked, trying to piece it all together. Are they controlling everything around you? I don't know how, she admitted, shaking her head. But I've seen it. They have people everywhere. They have ways of getting inside your head, making you doubt your own perception of reality. You think you're in control, but you're not. They make you feel like you are, but in the end, they always get what they want. My heart sank as the reality of her situation began to sink in. This wasn't just about escaping or finding a way to outrun them. It wasn't about staying one step ahead. The truth was more terrifying than that. They had infiltrated her life in ways that went beyond physical surveillance. They had gotten inside her head. We need a plan, I said, my voice growing firmer as I realized that we had to act fast. We need to gather information, find out who's really behind this, who's pulling the strings, and then we need to make sure they don't know what we're planning. Emily nodded, though the fear in her eyes never left. I don't know where to start, but we have to do something. I can't keep running forever. I felt the weight of the moment. This was it. There was no turning back. From this point on, we were in this together. The world we had known was gone. The world Emily had been living in was a prison of fear and manipulation, and now it was my turn to step into the shadows with her. We were both at risk, but there was no other choice. In that moment, I realized that the path ahead was going to be filled with danger and uncertainty. The more we uncovered about the collective, the more we would learn about the true scope of their power. And as we dug deeper, the truth would reveal itself, along with the horrifying consequences of exposing a force like this. But one thing was certain, we couldn't stop now. We had come too far, and no matter what came next, we had to face it together. The moment we decided to fight back, to confront the nightmare that had haunted Emily for so long, I knew there was no turning back. The truth had already been revealed. The collective wasn't just an organization. It was a shadow network, a force that had its fingers in every aspect of society, from government to business, from media to finance. They had control, they had power, and they had people in every corner of the world, pulling the strings and manipulating everything from the darkness. But what I hadn't realized, what none of us had understood until this point, was that the collective wasn't just a threat to our lives, they were a threat to everything. They weren't just after Emily. They weren't just trying to silence her. They were trying to silence anyone who knew too much, and in the process, they had a grip on the world that they intended to keep, no matter the cost. We had gathered the little information Emily had, the few fragments of their operations that she had managed to uncover. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces scattered across an endless expanse. There were dead ends everywhere. Every attempt to get closer to the collective only seemed to make them more aware of us. Every time we thought we had found a lead, they'd pull back into the shadows, leaving us with more questions than answers. But as I looked at Emily, standing before me with that same fire in her eyes, I knew there was no going back. If we didn't act now, if we didn't take the first step to expose them, we might never have the chance again. They can't keep hiding forever, I said, packing back and forth in the small apartment, trying to keep the panic from my voice. There's too much at stake now. We've already gone too far for them to just forget about us. Emily nodded slowly, her face pale but resolute. You're right. We need to strike first. We need to find their vulnerabilities and use them against them. If they think we're just running, they'll keep pushing us, keep hunting us. But if we turn the tables, if we make them believe we're in control, maybe, just maybe, we can force them to back off. Force them to back off, I repeated almost incredulously. How the hell do we force people who have been untouchable for years to back off? These people are untouchable, Emily. They own everything, everything we can't even begin to understand, and we're just two people. She stepped forward, her gaze hardening as she met my eyes. They're not untouchable. No one is. They've built their empire on fear and secrecy. If we expose them, if we show the world who they really are, their empire will fall. The problem is, they've made sure that anyone who tries to take them down is erased, but we have something they don't. And what's that? I asked, feeling the tension rise between us. Information, Emily said simply. We have the pieces they never thought anyone would find. They never thought I'd figure out what was going on. They thought I was just a disposable pawn in their game, but I'm not, and neither are you. Her words struck me like a jolt of electricity. She was right. We had the power to tear them down. We had the knowledge they never thought would surface, the information that could expose them for who they really were. It was a double-edged sword. If we used it, we'd be making ourselves targets for the rest of our lives. But if we didn't, we'd be living in the shadow of their power forever. The question is, I said, trying to calm the panic in my chest, where do we start? How do we get this information out to the world without them stopping us? Emily paused for a long time, her eyes flickering with thought. We start with the people they trust, the ones closest to them, the ones who don't know what they're really a part of. They've made a mistake. They've underestimated us, and now they'll regret it. I wasn't sure exactly what she meant by that, but the determination in her eyes was all I needed to see. She had a plan, and whatever that plan was, I was in. We didn't have time to waste. We had to move quickly before they discovered what we were up to. If they knew, they would find a way to stop us, just like they had stopped everyone else. The next few hours were a blur of action. We gathered the few pieces of evidence Emily had managed to collect, the bits and pieces that could lead us to the heart of the collective's operation. We didn't have much, but we had enough. We had the names of key players, some of the people who had been involved in the higher levels of the organization, and we had one person, just one, who had been close enough to them to know their inner workings, a person who was still alive and willing to talk. Emily's contact, her only lead, was a former associate who had worked with the collective and then vanished. He had been a whistleblower, someone who had narrowly escaped the web of deception they wove, and now he was hiding. We had to find him before they did. He was the last piece of the puzzle, the person who could confirm everything Emily had found, the person who could bring it all crashing down. I don't trust him, Emily said as we prepared to leave, her voice tight with worry. But we don't have a choice. He's the only one who knows what the collective is really after. Then we'll do this carefully, I replied. We don't have to trust him completely, but we can use him to our advantage. We get him talking and we expose everything. The rest will follow. It was the risk of a lifetime. If we didn't play this carefully, if we didn't cover our tracks, we would be walking straight into their trap. But if we succeeded, if we managed to get the information out, everything would change. The collective would lose its grip on the world. Their empire of secrecy would crumble, and the people they had been controlling for years would finally see the truth. We arrived at the location where Emily's contact was supposed to be hiding, a run-down, nondescript apartment building on the outskirts of the city. As we approached, I felt the weight of what we were about to do settling over me. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. If this went wrong, it would be over. As we entered the building and made our way to the apartment, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something wasn't right. The atmosphere was too tense, too charged. But before I could process what was happening, Emily froze, her hand gripping mine tightly. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They know." I looked around, panic rising in my chest. It was too late. The collective had found us, and now there was no escape. The door to the apartment burst open just as I turned to grab Emily's arm, and in that moment, everything went black. When I woke up, everything was different. The apartment, the people, the plans, they were all gone. In the end, the collective had been too powerful. They had won. But they had made one mistake. They had underestimated Emily, and they had underestimated me. The fight wasn't over yet. We would rise again. We would tear down the empire that had kept us in the dark for so long, because we had one thing they didn't have: each other. And in this fight, that might just be enough.